Welcome to the Lift Oneself podcast, Madeline. I am so thankful you're here with me.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Let's take a breath together. Breathe in through your nose. Hold it. Slowly release. How is your heart doing?
I think it's beating quite slow. I'm very relaxed.
What can you thank COVID for?
Well, I think it's allowed me to immerse myself in my writing process more deeply than ever before. I think writing is, it's an experience. I never saw it as a job. It's very much an experience. You do lose yourself in the universe of your creation. I find it very therapeutic, very empowering, very exhilarating. It's a wonderful experience, a wonderful process.
And for the listeners, just to let them in, Madeline is presently in Australia in lockdown. Mm-hmm. So can you explain how that has been and explain a little bit of the profession that you do?
Yeah, so my specialization is clinical psychology. Now that counseling has shifted to phone counseling. I don't know. I mean, it's challenging for me, I would say. I think for clients, it can be sometimes more comfortable for them. But for me, it's sometimes challenging because I like to read body language, and that's important for me. But I'm adapting.
What have you discovered that you didn't think was possible, though, with this interaction, that you found things about yourself that grew you?
Well, I guess I learned that I was giving too much emphasis to, the body language. And, I'm learning that it's not essential. Okay. And I've learned to tune into people's voices a lot more. So it's been a powerful learning experience for me as well to do that. It's also, I guess, fine-tuned and honed my ability to be a better listener as well. And I'm sure you've heard it said that, people need to be heard. And in order for people to be heard, you need to be a good listener. And so, of course, honing that ability is very powerful and in a therapeutic sense. So it's been, I guess, very beneficial for me as well. I'm thankful for that.
You had posted a post a few days back, and that's why I had reached out on your birthday. So happy birthday again.
Thank
and
you.
I hope you're still celebrating and dancing around the sun. Even though it's a little challenging under lockdown, yet we can still find our joys. The self-help and new age modality or
ideology as well.
Ideology. Yeah, true. And you brought forth how your clients that you serve, how there has been a detriment from that ideology. Could you expand a little bit more of what you've seen?
Yeah. With a lot of people who come to me who've, I guess, been enticed by those movements. And I just want to say, first of all, that before I go any further, I'm not demonizing the self-help industry entirely. There are some wonderful voices in the self-help industry. But there are also many voices that, unfortunately, oversimplify complex issues and that do engage in black and white thinking and that pretty much churn out ideas that are misleading. And I find that highly problematic. And obviously it's these unhealthy ideas that emerge from the New Age and self-help movements have damaged a lot of people. Yes, they're enticed into those movements because they want solutions to their problems. They want the quick fix. And because they're so desperate, they will abandon critical thinking and rationality for emotionality. And, that's understandable. It is understandable. I think when you're plunged in darkness and you feel there's no way out, and suddenly this ray of light spears into the darkness, okay, you're going to run towards it. That's what a lot of these people do. But the unfortunate reality is that these ideologies promote repression, and that's in addition to oversimplifying complex issues and encouraging this black and white thinking when there's, so much nuance to our emotions. But unfortunately, they don't teach that. They don't teach that, for example, I don't know, let's take guilt, for example. I heard, a teacher who I'd rather not name, who said that guilt is guilt. Now, this is verbatim from her book. Guilt is a totally useless emotion. Now, I have an issue with the extremism there. And again, that's another issue. A lot of those ideas are extreme, okay, and black and white, okay. So the problem there with that phrase is the word totally, okay, totally. And this is very misleading, because if we were to completely eliminate guilt, we would be psychopaths, okay? Because guilt is the voice of our conscience that tells us that we have violated our moral code and that we have done something wrong, we have hurt somebody. Now, imagine if the voice of our conscience is silenced or our conscience is eliminated altogether. Well, our behavior would become quite dangerous, because we'd have no, internal guidance to tell us that we've done something harmful. And so this is highly problematic, okay? And we see this with a lot of emotions, even with anger. There is healthy anger that can be channeled constructively. And I'm thinking of Martin Luther King Jr., who, he has stated that anger enabled him to write some of his best speeches. So he channeled that anger in a very constructive way. And we saw what he did for the world. We saw what he did for human rights and for people of color. Anger has a healthy aspect, but of course it also has a destructive and unhealthy aspect. But again, with many of these emotions, the New Age movement, the self-help movement will just look at the unhealthy aspects and say that sadness, anger, guilt, and so forth are just negative. And that's it. And of course, because these emotions are condemned, then they teach people to repress them. There are a plethora of studies that indicate that emotional suppression and repression is very deleterious. It's been shown to be associated with the development of various psychopathologies such as anxiety, depression, OCD, and it can even go underground and express, itself through the body, that which you have suppressed or repressed, and result in suppression of the immune system, for example. And so it can have a detrimental effect also on our physical health. So as you can see, when people enter these movements and they're taught to repress these emotions and to engage in spiritual bypassing, okay, where they're not supposed to look at the negative, they're not supposed to look at their emotional pain. What ends up happening is that over time, their health deteriorates, their mental health deteriorates. It's interesting that they talk about awakening a lot, but then something curious happens with many of these people, is that they go through, I suppose, a second awakening, okay? And they awaken from this illusion that they should repress everything in the name of positivity, in the name of being happy all the time, which isn't possible because we're human. And they awaken also from this illusion that we must not be human, that we must disown everything that it means to be human. When that happens, it's a very devastating moment for these people because they realize that they believed a lie and that they lived a lie. Then they realize as all those repressed emotions come to the surface, and they're often far stronger and far more toxic than they would be if they had accepted those emotions. And of course, what happens is they feel like they're having a breakdown. Well, they don't feel that way, sorry. They do have a breakdown and they just cannot cope. And it's very difficult to work with these people, very difficult, because they've already gone into the movement of psych issues and other emotional problems. And then they emerge with those problems amplified manyfold. In addition to their, psychological issues being amplified, they then have more emotions and issues to work through, such as forgiveness, okay, because they then feel angry, they feel outraged at the teachers who misled them. There's all that anger that needs to be processed. There's the resentment that needs to be worked through. And of course, all of those emotions need to be processed and worked through before forgiveness can occur, okay? Because forgiveness is a process in itself, It needs to arise organically because we hear many voices in the self-help movement who just say, forgive, and that's it. It's a very just do it mentality, and it doesn't work that way. And that's true for forgiveness. It's true for confidence. It's true for self-esteem and many other things. You can't just make this decision and in the next few seconds you have, a balanced sense of self-esteem or a resolution of any kind of problem. It just doesn't work that way. It doesn't work instantly. It is very much an instant gratification type of industry, and that's very problematic because it cannot work instantly. It's always a process, and for everyone, that process is going to be different for everyone. And I guess there's no set time. For some people it could be months. For others it could be a lot longer. For others it could be shorter. But certainly it is not something that happens immediately. It just cannot for all the reasons that I've outlined. Yeah.
As you indicated at the beginning, guilt is there not to identify with. I think that is what needs to be indicated. That we identify with our feelings where we think we are that, where it's like, no, you put a space, it's a feeling and there's information coming from it. Because like you said, if nobody had any guilt, oh my gosh, you think it's volatile now? It would be a whole different place in the world. Yeah, and absolutely. The guilt, I believe what I've seen too is it's redefining what that is. And it's allowing there to be curiosity. Because when you were saying it, it reminded me no different than some religions' ideology of not to fear. And it's like our nervous system is made out of fear.
That's a big one. Oh goodness. Fear it's really become a dirty word, hasn't it? And I see that everywhere. And you see this in the memes. You see this in the quotes. To be fearless all the time and to never have fear, when, everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear and all of this. I mean, I'm sure you've heard that saying. And fear is definitely one of the most demonized emotions. I wrote an entire chapter just on fear and on anger but definitely fear. Definitely, it's a dirty word, and it somehow as well needs to be erased. Now, I just want to circle back to something that you said earlier as well, before I continue what I was saying, is that, yes, every emotion is a messenger, and we'd be wise to listen to those messages, because they're trying to tell us something. They're trying to guide us, Even with anger, sometimes we can get angry when our boundaries have been violated, and anger is giving us that information. Very important. Sadness as well. Let's say you've been in a long-term relationship, and every time you come home to your partner, you just feel this sadness arise. Now, and this has never happened before, right? But it just keeps happening recently, okay? Now, we would be wise to listen to that sadness. What's it telling us? What it could be telling us is that there's something about the relationship that needs to be acknowledged. Something in the relationship may not be working. Perhaps we're being taken for granted. Perhaps we're being taken advantage of. Perhaps our needs aren't being met. We need to listen to the message of our emotions. And of course, as soon as we label all these emotions as bad, negative, toxic, let's get rid of them, we deny ourselves that information, which allows us to grow as well. They serve us as well, and they guide us through life. So it's very important to listen and not to demonize, and not to have that black and white thinking around emotion.
I think also too, people don't understand there is the nervous system that produces a fear of survival, because its one function is not to die. It's always constantly recording. And therefore, when you've been burnt, that's why you manipulate fire a different way. When you've gone to mountains, you know that gravity can pull you. That is a healthy fear to feel. What people, I think they're misleading people, is that there is a psychological fear that we do create because of belief systems, because of how we have identified with the loss and not being able to experience loss. And therefore, anything that we think we may achieve and that could be taken from us, that produces a lot of physiological fear. It feels physical, yet it's a psychological one. For me also too, tears. I'm like, why did tears get so simplified to be labeled as sadness? When tears are a multitude of emotions being expressed.
Yes.
If tears were only sadness, then why is it that somebody cries when there's a baby born? Or why is it that when you finally won that championship, people are crying? Or why is it when people are getting really angry, they cry?
Yeah.
Tears have so much, and that's where you interact and you feel out the emotions. Yet a lot of people want to shut it off and not really feel what's going on internally, because it's an overwhelming of information coming in. And so the tears are helping your psyche not like explode with all of this stuff that's coming up. And a lot of times people are trying to rescue people from their tears, trying to distract them from it. I see more and more in society that as soon as there's tears, people feel that they're weak, feel that they're going to be judged, feel that they're going to be taken advantage of, all these different things. And yes, there is some value to that. Yet there's also the part that you are not allowing yourself to authentically feel in that moment. And then that creates a suppression also. And I believe us as a society has to recreate context. We have suppressed so many emotions, especially in a professional, that emotions aren't allowed, where it's like, well, how are you going to have context? And I think we're starting to see the detriments of that, where people aren't even able to relate. It's all about the goal. It's all about the money. It's all about achieving this. And you're bulldozing over humankind. Do you realize there's humanity here?
Absolutely. I guess at the heart of the issues that emanate from, the self-help movement and the New Age movement is that we're not allowed to be human, and we're not allowed to embrace everything that needs to be human. Our humanness is taboo. Our humanness needs to be transcended, or it needs to be eliminated altogether. Again, very toxic ideology, because we're here to be human. We're here to experience everything that it means to be human. And there is beauty in that. If we even look at something like empathy, how are we supposed to serve humanity and empathize with others if we refuse to accept or acknowledge our own emotions, particularly the ones that are labeled negative? We cannot empathize with someone else. We cannot give them comfort if we are not comfortable with those, I prefer to say, unpleasant emotions. Because some of those emotions aren't pleasant to feel. They're important, okay? And as you know, empathy involves connecting with those emotions within, so you can forge a connection with the person sitting beside you who is in pain. So what are we doing by denying our humanness, by denying our emotions? We are creating walls between ourselves and others. And I don't see this as healthy for society as a whole. I don't see this as healthy for the evolution of our world. And it's quite sad. No pun intended. It is really sad. And, so I guess people also won't allow themselves to be vulnerable because, they want to bypass all those emotions. Okay. And so again, we're just creating a very unhealthy culture on so many levels. We are exacerbating the mental health crisis, which is a pandemic, and we are isolating people, and that's going to exacerbate their existing mental health issues, and it can also create mental health issues, okay, because we are social beings as well. We need human connection. It's absolutely crucial to our well-being. I know that the father of humanistic psychology, Abraham Maslow, if you look at his hierarchy of human needs, he kind of basically drew a diagram. It's a pyramid in order to become self-actualized. And right near the bottom, to have those basic needs such as food and, shelter, etc., met. Okay. But also right above that, we have the need to belong, the need for human connection. And this is absolutely crucial. If we don't meet this need, we will not reach our full potential. We can't rise any further along that pyramid to reach the apex. It's extremely important. And I think, I worry about, the way that, the ideas that emerge from those movements that I've spoken about have penetrated mainstream society. And that's what led me to write the book, because I probably wouldn't have been as concerned if, say, those beliefs were just isolated to a small group. Okay, I'd still be concerned, but I wouldn't feel compelled to share my thoughts on social media or to write a book about it. It's because mainstream society has soaked up those ideas. And often they don't even know where those ideas come from. And we see them regurgitating the memes and the quotes and the content of books, that are quite misleading. I really feel like we're creating a very unhealthy society.
When you're counseling some of your clients, can you see at the root that they are not trusting themselves?
Well, yes. I mean, of course, look, when people have engaged in spiritual bypassing for a long time, of course they can't trust themselves because they don't even know themselves anymore. They just feel, like I said, all these repressed emotions rising to the surface and completely overwhelming them, that they lose touch with who they are. And because they lose touch with who they are and they lose complete touch with their humanness, then of course they don't trust themselves. So yes, it's definitely a big problem. And I think it's a matter of teaching them to, first of all, just start to listen to themselves, just to allow, and to be accepting. That takes time, okay, because they've been taught not to do that. They've been taught to run. They've been taught to escape. They've been taught denial. And so that is a process to get them to learn to allow, to create that space where they can just be aware and to accept into their awareness, into that space of awareness, that which arises. And so they learn to start slowly, they start to learn to listen to themselves. I feel like from there they start to trust themselves a little bit more. They start to trust the information that arises from within. They listen to it. They listen to that guidance. They start to trust their instincts as well. Others prefer the word intuition. But of course, if you're not in touch with your body, if you've been told to transcend the body, the mind, the personality, and to identify exclusively with the spiritual self, which is this is spiritual bypassing, right? So everything else gets cut off. The entire human self gets cut off. So it's a matter of kind of reintroducing themselves to themselves. My belief is that you need to really feel the body, okay? Because we often hear also the term, the gut feeling, right? If you're disconnected from your body because you've been taught to rise above it, to transcend it, then you can't listen to those gut feelings, okay? Because they arise within the body as sensations, okay? So you need, these people need to learn to listen to their bodies and then they learn to trust their gut feelings, their instincts, their intuition, okay? So it's sort of, a step-by-step process or journey.
Can you give your definition of what intimacy is?
Is a willingness to be vulnerable, which is an act of courage. Sounds a bit counterintuitive to some people, It does take courage to be vulnerable. When we are vulnerable, when we open up, then we can allow intimacy to occur. So I guess that's how I would define it, as that willingness to be vulnerable and to open ourselves to another person emotionally. It's a risk, definitely a risk, but it's also very rewarding because it allows for a very profound connection, which is very nourishing. Okay, intimacy is very nurturing on both ends, So I suppose that's how I define it.
I would bring it a little bit further is that some people don't even realize they have to be intimate with themselves. They think it's always having to be shared with somebody else, and they forget that they are somebody, and that intimacy requires honesty. And to take down those defense mechanisms we have of not seeing our shadowy parts or, negative emotions or whatever aspects, it requires, as you said, it takes courage to be vulnerable, because you have to trust in your ability of facing whatever is unknown and knowing that you have the capacity to experience and to experience the pain, because life has it built in that there will be pain. There's no coming through life without, any psychological, physical, emotional pain. That's part of being human. And I see where the intimacy requires that honesty, to be with that vulnerability, to trust that whatever is uncertain and unknown in the depths that you go into, that you have the capacity to expand and to lean into the pain, not run away from it. And to allow that process. I see within my own experience, the mind will want to grasp at an arriving place, that it's safe and that it's, there's no more and I can figure everything out. And it's like, that's not what life is. And that's not what experiencing is, because we are in an impermanent world that is always shifting, evolving, and energy is a fluid movement that goes wherever it requires to go. And so it's a process that we are continually going through. And then when you put in all of these beliefs and definitions and identities and roles, it becomes really conflicting inside. And that's where you need your moments of stillness to be intimate with yourself, to be honest, because if you are not able to do that with yourself, sure, you can do it with other people to a certain layer. Yet when you can do it with yourself, it's very profound. And then you can relate with somebody else in such a beautiful connection, not in an attachment and a codependency, in a way that is connection, because I know I'm okay with me. And I know that you're okay with you, and we can go into those depths together. Feel the fear, feel the love, feel the immensity of it all. It's a mixed bag. It's not one or the other. To feel the depths. And when you go into the depths, it's like, wait, there's no ending to this. And it's like, yeah, there's no bottom. You want a bottom because you feel more safe, and it feels that I can manipulate and feel it more. Yet when you can go into the nuance and go into the depths of it, it's like, oh, there's so many ways that we can go into this. Yet it requires me to be intimate, and it requires me to be attuned to what is safe for me. How do I process things? Unfortunately, we have this awful thing of a comparison trap, and we measure ourselves to what we see around us because of our mirror neurons, which helps with our evolution. It's a way that we learn how to eat and dress and, seeing other people and mimicking. Yet we have to be very aware of when we compare to destroy ourselves, or trying to, as you said, bypass something where actually there's great strength in what you perceive as weakness, and to allow yourself to be intimate with the sensitivity, which can feel repulsive in a world that doesn't want you to be human, be a type of robot without feelings. And it's like, no, we do not want to lose our humanity. We do not want to do that, in my perception and in how I see the world. It's messy. Yeah, it's uncomfortable. At times it feels like wearing wet clothes and being cold. Yet when you can sit in those, you can really appreciate when you feel warmth. And you can really appreciate the gratitude of life, and that it's a roller coaster of things. And that's where you expand your compassion and where you expand your empathy and where you can deeply listen without having to fix and interfere things, that you can actually observe and allow another person to be seen for who they are, not your expectations, the diagnosis, the definitions that in the heart of us, that's all we're looking for is a sense of being seen in our naked truth and it not feeling repulsive. And I thank you for being the gift in the world, Madeleine, for challenging us to see it in more trusting ways, to question things, to be curious, and, and to go against the wind when the wind of, well, it has to be this way. And it's like, no, we're allowed to still question things. And also, see, are we going the wrong way? We have to be able to admit when we've gone wrong. We have to be able to admit when we've harmed ourselves. We can blame a lot. Yes, I understand that. Yet it's also to the empowerment of being able to see what is it that you're doing to yourself. Because if you don't see that, you don't even see what you're doing to other people.
Absolutely. And I think this is one of the misconceptions around critical thinking. People have this idea, I shouldn't generalize, there are many people, I suppose, who have this idea that critical thinking involves simply questioning the information around us. But it's so much more than that, okay? Critical thinking needs to be applied to ourselves, okay? So it kind of connects to what you were saying, earlier, that, with intimacy with ourselves, to look at everything within ourselves, to not be afraid to look at our shadow and the contents of our shadow, etc. To not, to be open and willing to look at our emotions and to look at our beliefs. So critical thinking also needs to be applied to ourselves. We need to look at our beliefs, ask ourselves, why do I believe this? Where did this belief come from? Does this belief have validity? And then looking for evidence to support whether or not it does. And that's with our beliefs, with our biases, with everything. As you said, that intimacy, as well as critical thinking, needs to be applied to ourselves. Absolutely essential, and essential for our own growth and evolution, and so that we can be of greater service to humanity. So, yeah. No, sorry, I was just going to say I probably sounded a bit preachy there, climbing on my altar and preaching, but I do that.
I find it fascinating that when we're just expressing, we can still have that inner critic at feel, because we know how it's felt when other people are speaking. Yet it's when we're talking about, introspection, I don't know why it feels like it's a preaching thing, because it's actually a tool that many people don't even know that it's available to apply to themselves. They think it's always, I have to look at other people and judge the other people to make the change happen. And it's like, no, change only happens internally. You can't change another person. If that was possible, the world would be, they try to do it with conditioning. They do it with fear and violence. And you see change. In that way. But the real inner change, the true change is within yourself.
Yes, and it takes a lot of work, a lot of commitment. Absolutely. Yeah. So you just think, when people see psychologists, they are not just willing to change, they are eager to change, they are desperate to change, and they still struggle, right? So you can imagine how impossible it would be for someone to change someone else. You just can't. That's something that we need to have, that dedication to change ourselves, and it's going to involve a lot of work and quite a journey. It's important for people to understand that, because it is a problem also in society where we try to change other people. We see this in all our interpersonal relationships, you know, that we try to change our children, we try to change, you know, our loved ones, we try to change our romantic partners, you know, and it doesn't work. And it cannot work for the reasons that you and I have outlined, you know.
Yeah, because those are your own wounds that are being reflected that you don't want to see. And that you are trying to, you know, project onto somebody else, make me feel better with what I feel lesser or unworthy or inadequate, whatever signal that's coming up, that is, again, trying to get your attention to give you information, yet you think you already know what it is, when it's like there's a deeper root and there's a really soft tenderness that is requiring your attention, yet there's a lot of filters to get there because it's a really deep vulnerability in there. Absolutely. And it has a lot of defense mechanisms, and you have to thank those defense mechanisms. That's the whole part of this work too, is that anger comes up and you see some of the actions you've taken, and you have to apply compassion so that those defense mechanisms can unarm themselves, so you can get into more and more depths, not use a harsh bulldozer to, I really loathe the word overcoming. It's like, no, you integrate and you release, you integrate and you open, you integrate and you breathe. You don't overcome and jump over a wall and bash through a wall. It's like you go through it. It's not overcoming, because you don't have to overcome yourself. You integrate and you grow.
That's right. It's almost like a self-destructive mentality. You know,
implode. And
exactly.
It's like, what? And I understand, you know, because trauma, when you understand it, I've had a lot of experience personally from childhood all the way till, you know, continuously in different dynamics of trauma. And I can see where the nervous system can get very armed into negativity, get very armed in defense mechanisms and hardening because of the experiences. Yet it's remembering, okay, I have to soften. And it feels repulsive, yet it's like you need to be connected to your vulnerability, your sensitivity. Yes, other people may have done things, and that you process that. Like, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting the facts.
No.
That's not what it means. And it doesn't mean that you don't use protection.
Exactly.
It means you have to stay with your softness and vulnerability. Like, cause like I said, there's so many vast places, and there's places that people don't even understand. Well, I have the tools, and it's like, yet you just have to develop them. They're buried, and you have to be able to hone them, sharpen them, see them, and you have to be able to acknowledge you have them. So that they can be created inside you. And what you're going to need is, you're going to need your emotional compass. You're going to have to be able to use your nervous system to sort through some things, and also let all that suppression go. And that work, it's going to suck for a while. It really is. And it's going to be confusing. It's going to be distorting, and it's going to be achy, painful, depressive, lazy, all kinds of things. And some days it's going to be elative, and you're going to feel like you're, you know, a mood disorder, because it really is, when you haven't been in touch with your emotions. And when you've been repulsing and putting on a mask for a sense of belonging. And then, you know, really rejecting yourself in the name of belonging to other people, because you think that they give you a better sense of self than what you have and your own connection. I would like to bring you into a reflective question.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask you to go and visit your 18-year-old self. And to bring the awareness you have presently. And you only have 3 words to tell that 18-year-old self. Just 3 words. So take your time, because it's reflective. It's reflective. So just take your time. What would those 3 words be?
I think I've got it. Question yourself. It was something I didn't really do enough of. I didn't. And I think I had a habit of questioning the world, questioning people. I was very curious, even as a child. And I was very inquisitive. I always wanted to know. But there was one place that I never looked, and that was within. And it really took me a little while to eventually learn. And we circled back to what critical thinking is, right? And intimacy, as you said. But it's vital to apply those practices to ourselves. And I didn't do that. I was blind to it. I didn't think that was necessary. It didn't even cross my mind. I'm glad that I eventually came to the understanding that it's necessary to apply critical thinking to ourselves. Otherwise, I feel my life would have been stagnant and my personal evolution would have been stagnant.
As you mentioned throughout the podcast, you have written a book, and it's in the process of you researching and seeing where publishing can be.
Yeah.
Could you let the audience know where they can find you?
At the moment, it's just on Facebook. Look up Madeline Albanese. I'm not sure. It's a tricky one to spell. Madeleinealbanese. So there's that extra E in there, and people seem to forget, And the surname is Albanese. I think I'm the only one on Facebook with that name. So I guess they can have a look at my posts and my work. And, the vision that I express in my posts is that same vision that I express in my book. They'll get an understanding of what my message to the world is,
I want to thank you for being on the podcast. This has been a very enriching, intimate, rich conversation. So thank you so much, Madeline. I truly appreciate you.
Great. Thank you for having me. And again, it's very enriching for me.
Remember to be kind and soft with yourself.
Okay.
Thank you for making it all the way to the end. I appreciate you and your time. If you found anything that was relevant, or perhaps there's somebody that you think can benefit from this podcast, please share it out. Help grow the community. Help grow Lift Oneself. You can find more information on our website at www.liftoneself.com. Until next time, be sure to be kind and soft with yourself. You matter.